Welcome to TechNOW. I'm your host, John Reid, also CEO of CATA Alliance. And today we continue our digital adoption series, interviewing thought leaders from around the world, getting their insights on key topics to really move Canada as a top digital nation. We're pleased to have with us Dan Pontefract, who's the Chief Envisionist of TELUS. And Dan's been involved in driving a new culture within TELUS. We saw his emphasis on collaborative technologies in really transforming the culture within that organization. So Dan, I wonder whether you could give us some perspectives. What drove that initiative, and what's new? What's the guidance here for other enterprises, other organizations in Canada?
It's a perfect question. First of all, thanks for letting me pontificate and be here today, John. Much appreciated. Well, I joined TELUS in November of 2008, and at that particular junction in time, what we call employee engagement, or sort of the determination of whether an employee or what we call team members want to say good things about the company, want to stay at the company, and want to strive to really do good, both in their role and for the customer. Quite honestly, it was a checkered sort of situation, meaning we had about 53% of the organization engaged in that year. And it's not as though we weren't performing financially or performing in our markets, but we thought that, well, perhaps we could do better in both the way in which that we were operating as a culture, which then ideally would manifest in greater returns in our communities and the customers that we serve. So fast forward 5 years later, and as of November 2013, internal employee engagement at the organization now sits at 83%. So a 30-point tick over those 5 years, which really is to say that organizations today need to kind of think twice about how they're operating, and do they really put employees first? Do they really believe that our employees are our single most important asset, or are they just sort of playing lip service to that? And if you look at whether Blessing White, Gallup, Aon Hewitt, it doesn't really matter what consulting firm and the data that they provide from terms of employee engagement suggests, arguably across the planet, people aren't engaged in their place of work. And for me, that's a travesty. I think if you're going to spend 40 hours a week or thereabouts in a place that provides you with an income in which to go fulfill some of the things you want to do in life, might you want to have a good time doing it? Might you want to feel that you're part of the situation, part of the decision, part of the entity itself? And that's really what I think manifested at TELUS, is that we wanted to provide a very harmonious culture so that downstream we would ultimately improve upon our performance, be it with our customers, our community, our partners, etc. And I believe that's happened. Personally, I've always believed in something that I've adopted as my own kind of personal mission statement, which is we're not here to see through each other, we're here to see each other through. And you can have all the technology bells and whistles on the planet, but unless you have a culture that's willing to give and take, that's willing to collaborate, connect, but realize that decisions may be made above you, but you're sort of included in opinion and feedback so that you feel part of something, that you're not treated like a number in an ERP, that you're actually a valuable member of the entire entity of the organization. That, to me, is the crystal ball that we need to gaze upon, this beacon of hope in our organizations, is to say, look, let's find better ways in which to put human into humanity in our organizations. And you know what? Then you're going to have this spirited teamwork of collaboration, connection. You can have all sorts of technologies in your org because you're all going to be using it because you feel trusted, empowered, and doing the right thing for the customer. So that's kind of my philosophical Socrates moment for you.
Now, there's quite a bit of discussion on some of the new digital tools for people to collaborate. You've made a pretty strong point: is if the culture is not there, the tools really aren't going to be much use. But did you find much resistance amongst the employees as new ways of communication were put forward, wikis, some of the other digital technologies? And if you had resistance, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And if you do inculcate that type of openness in your organization, eventually you're going to get a whole trail of people saying, I want in, I want in, I want in, to the manifestation of said culture through those technologies. Resistance is an interesting word. Sometimes resistance might be thought of as, you're absolutely Teflon against and not letting anything stick to you. It could be sort of other forces of nature, like wind pushing you back from actually, achieving something. It could be rain and thunder, this sort of noise, right? That's preventing you from understanding what perhaps is in the way. So I always love the word resistance when you look at it physiologically, metaphorically, and then scientifically. Churchill said, to improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often. And when you think about that and sort of its relationship to resistance, there should be in your organization somewhat of a disdain for the status quo. And that's part of the culture setting I think we've done and achieved at TELUS. The tools, when you're launching them in and amongst a culture change, become harbingers. They come like articulated points of resistance themselves, meaning because you're enveloping your organization and building that culture and saying, look, we believe in you, we trust you, we empower you, and then as you introduce more tools, they become systemic as part of that culture change. So what we didn't do is, if you remember it's a great movie, Field of Dreams. And in that sort of underlying thesis of the movie, there's this, if you build it, they will come mantra, right? Sort of build the park and everyone will show up. Well, we don't have that, meaning you can't dump a bunch of tools on people and just hope that they'll show up. So what you find is you kind of get some ambassadors, some change agents, at times maybe even a provocateur or two, to sort of say, look, here's what we're trying to do with the tools. Would you like to be an ambassador of change? So you sort of start, in our case, we start with wikis and blogs. And then eventually, once you're warming up and these people start showing some of the excellent benefits to a wiki or a blog, then you're like, oh, you start seeing people utilizing it in different ways. So an example, we were running out of IP addresses. And when you're a telecom like TELUS, running out of internet addresses is a bad thing. Matt Wilder, one of our engineers in the organization, was looking around and sort of seeing our open leadership philosophy called the TLP, TELUS Leadership Philosophy. He was looking at our learning model, which we said learning is part formal, informal, social. And he was looking at these wikis and these blogs that we were creating up, and he's like, well, if we're running out of internet addresses and I am responsible for helping the organization achieve a new type of internet protocol, which is in fact called IPv6, or Internet Protocol version 6. And here he is working with Google and Microsoft and other telecoms to create this new version of the internet. Well, what did he do? Well, in the past, what he could have done is just send an email out to the organization or interested parties and said, hey, go take this course. This is IPv6. Or he was looking around and saying, how do I perhaps utilize the philosophy of being open and empowering and use these social technologies? So he created a wiki and a blog site. He created a microblogging channel. He was using videos. And of course, he had some mentoring and articles. And he had formal courses as well. But he built this out on his own. And without prompting, without sort of any pressure whatsoever, I ultimately phoned Matthew up and I said, Matt, we don't really know each other, but I'm just curious, like, how did you sort of figure out that this is what you were supposed to do? I think it's brilliant. And I'll never forget this, John, because he says, well, Dad, it just makes sense. Can I get on with things now? True engineer, right? Binary, 1 and 0. But that's what's happening at the organization, and has happened, is that once people start seeing it, they start doing it. And again, we weren't dropping the tools on people without also looking at the cultural behavioral side. I mean, that's fool's gold. We actually thought about this like a Venn diagram where leadership, learning, and these collaborative technologies all fit together, and the sweet spot was obviously in the middle.
Dan, this is just excellent guidance. Culture as a key determinant of whether or not we will be successful in developing that digital innovation nation. And you've given the example shows the benefits of creating that culture. So I want to thank you for joining us this morning. John Reid, signing off for TechNOW.